Farscape Engineers Inspector Summary video. We're here in Springfield, Illinois, and this Farscape building's around 1925. This Farscape is 75 plus years old. All original hardware. What we're finding here is all these bolts are original square heads. A lot of rust buildup on this Farscape. As you can see, all this needs to be cleaned out. And 100% of all the treads and some of the rails have all been cleaned, rebolted, but none of the treads were cleaned of rust. So every one of these treads needs to be rebolted again. All the rust needs to be removed, and then the treads returned to their position after the area has been cleaned. So the law is very simple. Requires the following: load test a Farscape if it's in pristine condition, and that load test is basically putting a load on these platforms, a load on these treads, and a load on that other platform, and you repeat the process all the way down. It's 100 pounds per square foot, so that's a platform over there of 4x3. So you would put 1,200 pounds on that platform for a period of 30 minutes and take measurements. You would do that to this platform, and so on and so forth. You take about 1,000 pounds on these treads and you load test for that for 30 minutes. So that's the only way to guarantee that all these old bolts, if this Farscape was in a pristine condition, that's the only way I can guarantee that this square head bolt is gonna pass an inspection. It's called a load test, a live load test. The alternative to a live load test of the 100% of the Farscape is to change all the bolts on certain components, such as the staircases, like they did here, but they did it wrong. But let's say this was a clean repair and there was no rust in the connections and it was rebolted. Now I only have to do that platform, this platform. So it's load test everything that's old, but anything that's been refurbished, do not load test it, because you have all brand new bolts and it's been cleaned. That's to the industry standard. The final way to avoid a load test is 100% of all the connections that are old, 50, 75, 100 years old. So every one of these square head bolts is going to be switched out now to a new bolt. The area is going to be cleaned and rebolted and sealed with silicone. So once you start cleaning out every old bolt, every clip, every connection gets the bolt popped out, the rivets popped out, and then you rebolt it on all the major connections, not all the minor connections, all the major platform structures, supports, all the treads, all the posting on the rails. Once you change out every single bolt, it's called a refurbishment, then there's no need for a load test. And on average, the load test criteria for a refurbished Farscape is, on average, is every 25 years the load test question will be brought up. All right, so let's go down slowly. We're going to see some of the issues. Rust is building up on all these clips. Okay, got to be changed out. See how the guy changed the bolts, but he didn't change the rust behind it? These treads, look at all the rust inside. Look at all the rust inside. There's better ones coming down that show all the rust. Look at all the rust that stayed in there. They changed the bolts, new stainless steels, but they left all the rust inside. So every one of these is compromised and has to be cleaned. Take the tread out, clean that area, prime the area, put it back, silicone shut it with new bolts. Let's talk about everything back into the building. These are all through rust jacking or ice jacking, all the connections back into the building. I strongly recommend here that we put an angle that ties these three bars back together, and then use an angle to basically tie these back in. This is all needs to be cleaned and then sealed so water doesn't get back in there, and all the bolts, obviously, of all the posting, corner posting. I'm a little concerned about these corners because they're old, so we have to determine whether or not we want to put a cross brace here and put a bolt, because a lot of times these things are rotted out and these things are tubular, so there's gonna have to be some testing on that to make sure. Let's go down. We're gonna see just what occurs on the cement side that needs to be done, but I need to go down one, or maybe here. Water has been getting into this building. All this gets to get repacked. All that underneath there. I need a new epoxy bolt. Either verify that connection by drilling it out, or having a mason open up that whole area, or 5 inches away, put an epoxy bolt and basically nullify the need for me to verify that connection either through load testing. I can duplicate a connection and now I don't need to load test. I can also unify the connections by running a piece of angle, 3x3, underneath here and extending about 5 to 8 inches, extending 5 to 8 inches out that way, And basically on here, I'm gonna fit about 3 to 4 epoxy bolts. And where they touch underneath, you mechanically fasten that. So now I've basically eliminated the need to verify the connections. You still have to repack 100% of all the cement, but now that you've nullified the need for a load test through what's called duplication. Again, re-cementing. Again, this is great. Look, the bolt is still, the head is there, but there's no shaft. This is typical. Here's a typical, there's the nut and the bolt, there's the head, right there, nothing in between. So just standard, she is old, she's 75 plus years old. Every one of these major connections need to be rebolted. Every one of the minor connections, if they're in good condition, they can stay minor connections only. Again, 100% of all the treads need to be rebolted, taken out, cleaned, put back. Good opportunity to dip these treads. Got a lot of water damage getting into this building. And these dragon tears, these rusty tears coming down is an indication that water keeps getting in there year after year. Duplicate all the connections or verify every connection into the building. Duplication is going to be much cheaper. Epoxy bolts, by the way, the epoxy bolts that are going to be up there can only happen in the spring, probably April, May, June. They need a good weather, night and day, 60 to 80 degrees, consistent. Here's one of the staircases that's and they reinforced it here. Instead of changing out this clip, this is what's happening with the clip. This clip is gone now, and it ate already my angle up here. My clip got eaten, and that's what the clip looks like. It's a wraparound. It's a piece of angle, and then they heat it and wrapped. It's called a shoe. This is what happens when you let the shoe rot. It just eats both sides, and then it finally falls away. They have a temporary band-aid here for it. All right, let's go down. Little bulge in the gratings. Now it just starts repeating itself all the way down. Cement situations. Cement. High backs, gratings. Just all original hardware on this Farscape. 100% refurbishment of every connection. That's a major connection. All minor connections. There's only going to be a few on this, but most likely it's going to be a 100% refurbishment of all connections. And I'll talk to you about what that means in a second. As far as on the support, a lot of these were wedged with wood, and it was that wood that started doing a lot of the spalling that basically pushed everything out. After a while, that wood, when you pack it with cement on the outside, it looks great for a few years, and then it just pops, and that wood stays wet year after year. This Farscape is presumed to have lead. It's older than 1978, so EPA rules apply. He must be a licensed renovator. Look at this. Look how much rust is eating this, eating the shoe, eating the clip, and it's going to do what the one up there. This is eventually going to eat through here and pop. Look how much rust is there. So every one of these shoes need to be, you got to come in here and cut all these rivets out, and then either make a new shoe or use the existing shoe if it still has enough material left on it. Got a silicone shut after you clean 100% of the treads. Let me show you a couple things here. And again, everybody's going to come out on these. So these gratings are all 1/2-inch bar, standard. But on these supports, the next thing that's needed on here is this connection right here. See this connection right here? That's a single bolt. This support is basically part of the triangle arm, and that bolt is 75 years old. We're either going to change these all out, or if they're in good excellent condition, which this one seems, I need a gusset plate put in here. And that gusset plate is going to pick up 2 bolts here, and going to pick up 2 bolts here. And basically we've reinforced that connection. As soon as we do that, plus the tie backs into the building with the epoxy bolts, the Hilti epoxy bolts back into the building, we basically nullify the need for this connection to be load tested, because we refurbished the entire structure, and the tie back in, which is an unknown, gets nullified by us doing an epoxy connection back into the building. All right, let's continue going down. After a while, this repeats itself and over again, and I'm gonna probably end it here and pick it up down there, because you do go to a platform down below. That platform is only about 4 to 6 inches off the grade. We probably need to elevate that to 12 inches off grade. And because as it sits in the snow year after year, it's rotting out that whole entire catwalk system that goes to that gate. So I'm going to pick up my inspection from down there. And repeating, 100% of the treads need rebolting. 100% of the platforms need rebolting. 100% of the supports need rebolting. 100% of the supports need to be re-hilted back into the building to nullify the need to verify these connections back into the wall, or view through a load test is the only way I can verify these. And the thing about a load test is that it's done every 5 years. So you have to load test it today, and 5 years from today I need a load test again. But as soon as you epoxy it back into the building, the average cycle, again, and this is based with the fire official, the average cycle is 25 years if the engineer performs some pull tests on some of these bolts that are sticking out of the building to verify that everything is good. So we're going to end it here. It just repeats itself over and over and over again, and I'll pick it up from that part that goes into the parking lot. Down Fire Escape Engineers Inspector Summary video. Here we are now on part 2 of this fire escape in Springfield, Illinois, and what we have is a fire escape that goes down. Very unique situation here, and that is that there's a cantilever halfway through this fire escape. We're about 4 floors up, and this cantilever, which is now in a down position, it's frozen in a down position, was actually one of the ways that you keep from breaking into the building. So we probably are going to get this cantilever back into action, put a release arm on it so that it only opens up from above, and that way it will stop any building break-ins from happening into this part of the building here. Okay, so this is the structure that we have, probably about 12 stories. And now let's take a look. Same situation that happened on that fire escape. Up above is happening here, though all the bolts on the fire escape have been rebolted, but again, they never removed any of the rust. So every single one of these has to come out. We have the cantilever here. The cantilever needs to be reassessed. You got to rebalance. You got rust growing in the connection, so we got to be careful, because see the bolts that are holding this weight, and this weight is going to fall down. So this area, this does need to be dealt with and secured so that it doesn't pop and hit the ground. See all the rust? So all this is going to be done. You got cement situation. Every single one of these needs to be re-cemented. Anything beyond 4 inches square, 6 inches square of my connection is a mason's situation. It's a mason repair. As you can see, some splitting of the platforms, cement issues again. This used to go up, so this is the pivot. So as you can see, there's the pivot, it needs to be repacked. So if we want to, we can make this thing so that nobody breaks into the building. There is a parking lot down here that they've been using. It belongs to the bank, and this parking lot has been a source of people breaking into the building. So again, all the rebolting, 100% of the treads, 100% of the connections have to be rebolted. Okay, changed. See all the connections back into the building. Just packet it, and then we're going to put new epoxy bolts. As you can see, we're going to go down to the cantilever. There's a last cantilever to the ground. These pulleys and the cable is original, so we need to get those all swapped out and put a release arm up here so that nobody can break in and pull this thing down. So, but we do have a lot of rust on the pivots. So, but this thing, if you were to step out and step it down, it's rubbing up against the wall right there. And that cable needs to be swapped out. New pulley systems, those are no good. Those are all 75 plus years old. There's a weight inside that box. So there's probably gonna be a release arm somewhere here. And when you do the release arm this way or this way, that release arm will let this drop 2 to 3 feet per second, hit the ground, but right now it's currently scraping against the wall over there.
I walked all the way out on it and it didn't go down.
So we have somebody that said they walked all the way out on it, it didn't go down, so it's currently frozen. And if that's the case, as I go out now and test it, this is going to be one of the issues. So I'm... I set off the alarm. But it won't go down, so it's a life safety issue. Okay. It's an alarm so people don't break into the building. from the alarm. The guy's gonna go and shut it off. Again, all original hardware must be load tested or must be refurbished to avoid the load test. One or the other. So spot repairs can be done and load test the difference based on the fact that everything's old, or refurbish everything and get this into a 25-year cycle that load testing is not required during that time. Yes. Some reason I thought you were the guard there. Oh, the building. I'll be down in a minute. Yeah, if you can, he'll let you in. Can you go let him in? He's gonna meet you. That was the inspector for the city in Springfield. So that's it on this. We gotta get this secured. That piece at the bottom, because it won't come down. That is a life safety issue. This entire platform needs to be raised at least to the level of this, so that in the snow, it's kind of low. And because it has so much snow on top of it, it is rotting beyond belief. So I recommend that this get elevated, and just before you get to the gate area, it drops down to accommodate the stepping. But as soon as you raise this about 12 inches off grade, when the snows come, this thing won't rot, won't blow into the building. And then wherever it gets near doors, it does a step down. Also, we highly recommend that the building get the roof done. And this catwalk is going to be able to be taken apart anyway, but this roof should be a rubber roof prior to this portion of the fire escape getting put on, so that way it'll carry this area for the next 50 to 75 years. Any questions? Fire escape inspector Meneses here, 800-649-3333. Fire Escape Engineers Inspector Summary Video. Inspector Meneses here. We're here in Springfield, Illinois. We're looking at this particular building here. A couple of issues on this fire escape. We got an original fire escape on the upper floors, and it looks like a new cantilevered system was built, and it looks fairly new. The tread construction is fairly new construction. A couple of issues. We are seeing some evidence of water getting in, so these bolts are going to have to be either load tested and or changed out if it's cheaper, simply because we got evidence of rusty tears coming through the back end of it on these. Fire escape is counterweighted backwards, so people have to walk out third or half of the way in order to activate this. And in case of fire, you're going to need a fireman to hold it down on the ground so it's out of balance. It needs a release arm to keep people from pulling it down, and it needs to be balanced, so that weight system needs to be played with in order to make this fire escape system drop. We do have rusty tears coming in, and that's typical on some of the welded components. If you don't seal these from above, this is what's going to happen. So now every one of these welded connections is compromised. Every one of these welded connections is compromised, so we need to go in there and clean that, and then we also need to re-bolt it. You can't weld it back in there, you have to re-bolt it. Any place that has a welded connection, I want a bolt. In lieu of a load test, I want a bolt in there, so wherever, for example, I think we have this one right here, the new add-on. It's welded, so as soon as you bolt it and you seal it, we're good. This one down here, same thing, this is welded. As soon as you bolt it and seal it, we're good. Looks like there's been some add-ons. I don't know if there was a truck damage or something, but we need to verify the connections into the wall or duplicate the connection in lieu of a load test. And some of these triangles, especially the one up above, for example, that's holding the pivot, as soon as you bolt that up, we don't have to load test it or have it, don't have to have an x-ray to verify the welded connection. So, with that being said, the last piece of this puzzle that I'm concerned about is these treads. Somebody took out all the bolts and then just welded them back into position, and basically that means that, you know, they've let the rust and the water get in there. So every one of these needs to be rebolted and sealed from above. If there's any of them that have a rust in the connection that's excessive, it needs to be cleaned out prior to rebolting. But 100% of these need to be rebolted and sealed. All the connections into the wall, these are all 50 to 75-year-old connections, and they need to be verified, load tested, and or duplicated in lieu of a load test. And that could be with an epoxy bolt or a through bolt, depending on what this building is inside. If this building is open on the inside, we can just basically put in a through plate, 3/4 through plate, and either single duplication or unification of the platforms can be done to avoid that. These connections on the outside of these supports, those are 50 to 75-year-old bolts. Those can stay if they're in good condition, but then I need a gusset just behind it to basically nullify the fact that that's a 50 to 75-year-old bolt, and that only a load test will verify that. As soon as you put a gusset behind there, we don't need to load test, and we nullify the need. Any and all railing connections need to be cleaned. Any and all connections on the braces on the fire escape railings need to be rebolted. And then spot paint enough to make this thing pass. Looks like they've been keeping it painted, so painting is not the issue. So you do have to spot paint all your work and any rust. But this fire escape does have enough paint on it, just need to spot paint on it. Otherwise, a full paint job is recommended in order for it to get a 10-year warranty, and all vendors should be offering a 10-year warranty if a full paint job is inclusive. The other thing too is that this fire escape is older than 1978, so you must be a licensed renovator to handle this fire escape due to the EPA lead laws. You must be a licensed renovator in touching this fire escape. Any questions? Fire Escape Engineers, Inspector Summary Video. This is Inspector Meneses. 800-649-3333. 800-649-3333. We're here in Springfield, Illinois. Now go slowly up before you don't go too fast up, because she's gonna want to come up. So go ahead. I just want to see where the counterbalance is at. Okay, right about there. Very good. As you can see, it's kind of violent. Don't be scared. You're not going to pass the ground in case you fall. All right, let's start the process all over again. So if this was an evacuation, Have to be ginger a little bit, I'm sure. Be safe. Go ahead. And now you have no emergency going on, but you're about a third of the way there. You can make it come down as fast as you want. Don't worry about it. This is just, I just want to pretend it's a, you know, there's an emergency. Because usually during a fire, you're not going to have that much time. If I was behind you, I'd be kicking your butt right now, saying, "Dude, what are you waiting for?"
They wasn't with us.
Good. It hit the ground. Very good. All right. So now, do me a favor, and you're going to step off of it for a second, and I want you to see how quickly it goes back up. But catch it so it doesn't go far. Let it go and grab the grip. All right. So now bring it down, and just. We're doing a fire escape inspection.
Oh.
All right, so now you're gonna just hold it in position, put your foot on it. This just indicate what a fireman would have to do in case there's a fire. Somebody would have to sit here and physically hold the thing. So if you can hold it down here for a second, I'm just gonna do a quick run up.
Move my leg over.
Yep, so we got some rust in on the top of these treads. So that's an indication that they changed the bolts, but the rust has actually been building up in there. And some areas have more rust than others. Okay. But again, it's not that bad, but you got at least 1/8 of growth of rust. From up here you can see where the water is accumulating and getting in there between the angle, and that's mainly the only thing holding other than this crisscross. There's been some reinforcement of these plates back here. But again, welded connections that weren't sealed, and you're getting water eating up the welds. Some rusty tears on some of these. So it looks like a lot of these, they basically popped the bolts, but then instead of, they did a full bead weld on the top on these. So as soon as you put the bolts back in this thing and sealed any more water from getting in there, we should be all right. You've got your shoes that are basically rotting out the top, so these need to be cleaned and then sealed. And look how much you're getting there. Structural crack on the entire wall, because these things, through rust jacking and ice jacking, split these things. A lot of rust buildup in these corners, as you can see there. A lot of rust buildup in these corners there. A lot of rust buildup, popped bolts. Shoes, standard maintenance requirements. So a lot of these treads, I think, here, up here at the top, these are the original truss rods. They go through. I think the bottom was, may or may not have that truss rods. I gotta check. Again, gusset plate these back here to avoid having to load test that. Gusset plate it back here to avoid having to load test that. You need to verify through a pull test. Make sure that's still anchored well into the building. Get behind here and clean these things out. Then seal these up with silicone or tar to avoid. Seal that corner up so that water doesn't get back in there, cause any rust jacking or ice jacking. So again, welded. As soon as you bolt this back up again, the welds don't need to be load tested and or x-rayed for verification purposes. A lot of these brackets, a lot of these boxes that hold your grating need to be rebolted in all the corners. Ladders have all original hardware, change those out. Original hardware, change those out. Tie backs into the building. Re-verify this is the fire escape for the firemen. Look at that. Exposed nut and bolt. And down there you can see the exposed nut and bolt there. So change those all out. Make sure you have no wires or anything here that's going to hurt somebody. And with that, fire escape needs refurbishment and or load testing in order to satisfy the fire marshal's violation. Any questions? Fire escape engineers, Inspector Meneses, 800-649-3333.
It's a challenge for me to get my world inside your mind. Yeah. You know it's so challenging to leave this petty world behind. Yeah, stupendously fly, deal on a girl straight kicking. Dates on the weekends, had them string like a violin. I would bug off your beauty, but only deep as a skin. Thought about me, helping you to see the mountains. You still in the fly cars with difference. Flirt with cats blatant about intending to hit skins. But interesting, even though you flow with the crowd and you a popular gal, I still wow by possibilities of me and you. Us, but it's a challenge for me to get my world inside your mind. Yeah. You know it's so challenging to leave this petty world behind. Come on. Back in high school, we was wet behind the ears new, immature and had no clue, raising hell trying to be cool. But now we're grown up. Now we're grown up. Opposites attract, positive and negative react. But on the real, I can't deal with certain omens. I got too much hate for Caesar to be a Roman. Yo, I'm way past playing the game of fitting in. When I fought just to get out the box I was sitting in. Society's a runaway train bound to plummet, and I'm leaning off, waiting for the moment to jump from it. Yo, I know that you enjoy going clubbing. I'd rather be just with you hugging, cause life indeed is all about loving. I'm trying to be the man that others wasn't. But you gotta work with me, baby. Yo, 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 yo. Stop fighting against me, pretty lady. Come on, yo. Enough of my life, enough of my life has been petty. Don't you know we got to go? I'm trying to grow with me, baby. Yo, yo. Challenge for me to get my world inside your mind. Yeah, yes, you know it's so challenging to leave this petty world behind. Behind. It's a challenge for me to get my world inside your mind. You know it's so challenging to leave this petty world behind. Check it out, check it out, check it out, check it out, just a challenge, girl. Just a challenge, girl. Come on.
Firefighters are taking down the ladders and rolling up the hoses. But earlier in the night when they pulled up, there were flames coming out of the side of the building. Firefighters say it was one of the scarier moments because when you pull up to a building and you see children and mothers hanging off the side of the fire escape, smoke swirling around them, they said that's scary, scary stuff. They got up there, they got the ladders up, and they said nobody got hurt.
The fire escape, there was 3 or 4 people hanging off the fire escape. They couldn't get off. They were just on the fire escapes. I had people hanging in the fire escapes at the rear of the building, and on this side of the building, we had a bunch of people on that fire escape.
About 50 people were displaced inside this building. However, firefighters say there's good news tonight. It looks like everybody will be allowed to go back in except the one unit where the fire was in. They said that's good luck to them tonight. I'm Bob Wilson on the scene of Bridgeport. News 8.
The smoke, the flames, and the frightened faces, all in a firefighter's line of duty. But Chief William Hitchcock remembers the night it wasn't the fire that almost stopped him.
Oh, I was scared to death.
But the fire escape that broke underneath him.
Where the railing just came away from the building.
And our investigation found across Massachusetts more unsafe fire escapes. Rusty, deteriorating, crumbling, broken. And what state officials didn't know, the system they set up to keep fire escapes safe is also falling apart.
The potential ramifications are disastrous.
So let's look at this one. This expert ironworker is licensed to build, maintain, and inspect fire escapes. So then over here? For months, we examined dozens of them with alarming results.
Looking at this today, would this pass inspection?
No.
In dormitories, at theaters, at homes, and apartment buildings.
Rust is actually eating away the metal of the fire escape.
Correct.
And the bottom line?
It'll get weak and then eventually it'll fall.
This one has rotted connections. This one missing bolts, twisted metal.
Would the stairs come down?
No, never come down.
This one a broken tread.
So how dangerous is it for the people inside this building?
This fire escape is definitely going to put somebody either in the hospital or it's going to put somebody in a cemetery.
Fire escapes are so critical. The state building code requires they be certified for structural adequacy and safety every 5 years. But our investigation found that safeguard is simply being ignored. Here's proof. We chose fire escapes at random in Boston, Somerville, Cambridge, Worcester, and here in Quincy. We checked building department files.
But there's no fire escape certification.
Not in this file.
To see if building owners had submitted their mandatory inspection reports.
There's no certification in this one either.
Right.
Bottom line, not one we checked in Quincy had been certified as safe. And the director of inspectional services admitted because of staffing shortages, the city has no idea how many other fire escape owners are breaking the rules.
And as a result, do you know how many fire escapes in your city are safe or not?
Well, I don't know.
In Worcester, not one we checked was certified. In Somerville,
No.
4 more fire escapes.
Did it fall through the cracks? Yeah.
Not one up-to-date certification. And again, no system for keeping track.
How can they get away with that?
I guess that the shortest answer of all is because we don't have the resources to sit here and follow up on these things.
If structural deficiencies are reported, local building inspectors can actually evacuate residents until repairs are made.
Would you talk to us on camera about this? No?
But when we surveyed 24 more communities, most admitted they had no idea how many fire escapes were certified. In Taunton, inspectors told us they haven't seen a certification in 25 years. Northampton officials said it's a cold day in hell when that happens. In Cambridge, too, not one of our test buildings was certified, and the official in charge would not come out to discuss it. In Boston, where there are more than 8,000 fire escapes, again, according to inspectional services, not one we checked was certified. Officials know they are required to enforce the building code, but they admit they don't always know if owners are breaking the law.
The building code is being ignored.
Right, but it's difficult to write a violation when you don't have knowledge of something like that.
But state officials say for a critical issue like this, communities should know. And they warn the Massachusetts building code is not optional.
Does it worry you that these fire escapes are not being certified?
This is an important issue and should not be ignored.
That's because after the smoke and flames begin, it'll be too late to learn you've got no way out.
I can't stress it enough, Hank, that these things have to be maintained and someone's got to be watching.
As a result of our investigation, state officials will now issue an alert to local inspectors. Meanwhile, if there's a fire escape on your home or office, you can contact your local building department to make sure it's properly certified. In the newsroom, I'm Hank Philippi Ryan.
Welcome to Firescape Services. We provide inspections and certifications, repairs, and load tests to remove violations in your area and nationwide. So whether you're an inspector or whether you're somebody, you have your own home, you have your own building, the first thing is the law is very clear. It must be structurally sound and must be kept painted. So is the fire escape painted or is it not painted? And does it have more paint than rust or more rust than paint? So I can just look at this fire escape and say that I have evidence right now that there's more rust than paint on this fire escape. So immediately, if you were to call an inspector out here, the law doesn't allow him to pass this fire escape simply because it has more rust than paint. And structural means that if the fire escape is 50 to 75 years old, when any inspector is looking at it, he's got to see some evidence of maintenance. And maintenance means that I have to see a change in bolts, I have to see a change in rivets, I have to see some new hardware. Because when I go up to a fire escape, I see nothing but original hardware. That hardware is 50 to 75 years old. It's been out in the weather 50 to 75 years, and it's just impossible for not one of those rivets, one of those bolts to be changed in 50 to 75 years. And whenever that occurs, what I have is a fire escape that somebody's been constantly painting, but they've never done anything structurally to it. So now that makes the entire fire escape pretty much suspect. So now I have to be careful as to what I'm looking at to make sure that the structural now, on especially the major structural connections, are in good order. Thank you for watching our video. Please call us today at 800-649-3333 to discuss your fire escape issue with a live inspector or schedule an inspection in your area today.